Hi, welcome to another episode of Silver Fox Scotland. Now, Britain is unusual in having no limit to the number of patients a GP can have. Most European countries have limits. It's usually around about the 1,000 mark, some slightly higher, some slightly lower. But basically, European countries say that each GP should have no more than 1,000 patients or so. Britain has no limit. The BMJ recommends that as an absolute emergency limit, there should be no more than 2,000 patients per GP, but this is only in an emergency and it should be remedied immediately or at the very earliest opportunity. And they recommend that no doctor should have more than 1,200 patients per GP. They're saying that is the absolute maximum they recommend. Should be less, but no more. And the reason for the 2,000 limit is in emergencies, if, for example, a GP in a practice dies or whatever, and they have to divvy his patients out to others, for example. So there'll be a short-term uplift, but it has to be emergency only and short-term. Otherwise, the actual health of the doctor himself or herself will become, at risk through stress, for example. So they're the figures. Now, across the whole of England and Wales, there is approximately, I think the figure is something like 1,200. I've got the figure here. Yes, it's approximately 1,200 across England and Wales. That's the average. So what do you think is the average in Scotland? 1,200? No. 1,300? No. 1,500? No. It was 1,500, but it's actually increased. The SNP have now been basically told by the BMJ and other groups that they have to increase the number of GPs in Scotland. Otherwise, the GP service in Scotland will collapse. And don't forget that GPs are the gatekeepers to consultants. So if the GPs are struggling, it means people can't get to the consultants, which means by the time they do get to the consultants, it's far, far too late. There are now 227 more patients per GP than 11 years ago, a rise of 15%. It means now that on average, there are 1,743 patients per GP. They're coming up and pushing to the absolute emergency limit, but this will be their standard everyday amount. This is 500 more than the English and Wales average and is way more than what the General Medical Council and the GMC and the doctors' unions recommend. The doctors themselves are working flat out. Don't be annoyed when you ring your doctors and can't get through. It really isn't the fault of the doctor. These guys are booked solid. They get no respite. They are basically running at nearly 60% above the recommended level of patient care. Imagine you doing your job but having to do 60% more work for such a pittance more, relatively speaking, after taxes, in a country that already taxes them very highly anyway. It's not fair on the doctors. It's not fair on the patients. Meanwhile, those smug ones in Holyrood are sitting there thinking, oh, well, everything in the garden is rosy. We're not hearing any complaints. They need to start hearing complaints. How more people in Scotland aren't actually literally dying in the street, I do not know. The trend, by the way, is to rise further. There is no relief because they're not putting the money in. They're not hiring new doctors. The population is increasing. And what happens as well is the population is increasing in the wrong way. You're not getting babies coming in. You're getting increasing numbers of older people. Older people are the big drain on the health service. And you know what it's like as you get older. Little niggles here, little pains there. Oh, I'm not going, what's that? What's that lump? And so forth. You know, people between 20 and 40 very rarely see a doctor. People between 40 and 60 see a doctor occasionally. People once you're over 60, geez, you're living there, aren't you? Oh, I've got this problem here with my hip and all my legs hurting and I've got this and my breathing and all that. And as the population ages out, this is going to get worse. Doctors are struggling now. How bad is it going to be? And yet the SNP seem absolutely inured to all the suffering. Now, there's Jackie Bailey has piped up on this. She does. She's very, very on the ball, on the pulse, as it were. She's the health spokesperson as well as other tasks. But she's, I just said on the pulse. It was an unintended pun. But she has got a finger on the pulse on this one. She said, when GPs themselves are leaving the profession because of stress, it's no wonder patients are struggling to get appointments. GPs, she says, play an essential part in the early interventions. Public health. They are the first port of call for the majority of patients. They take pressure off hospitals, so this fall in staffing should alarm everyone. Indeed, it should. If you're not going to invest in new doctors' surgeries and fill them with new GPs, then you are going to suffer a major, catastrophic failure of the NHS in Scotland. Because if you can't get to the doctor, where do you go? You go to the hospital, but the hospitals themselves are already stuffed to the ginnels. You're not getting in to a hospital, you know, even with serious conditions now. It's that bad. I know, well, I don't know them personally. I've heard the tales of people who get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to get in the car to drive to a hospital in the hope that if you get there at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, by the time you get there, the queue won't be so bad and you can get seen at some point during that day. Is that how the health service should be run? I don't think so. So next time you're voting, look at how bad the health service in Scotland is and think that's nearly 18 years of SNP rule. And I did the video last night about how they're spending, or was it this morning? No, it's coming out. It's it's on the other channel. I think I did it this morning for the start. Anyway, I did a video on the other channel. We were talking about how, despite the cutting everything else, they're pumping £27 million more into the foreign pretending embassies. Meanwhile, you can't get an appointment. Not right? Let me know what you think. Thanks very much. Bye.